Welcome back again. Part two. Welcome back again. Part two of The Ancestors Are Calling Me. Ancestors Are Calling Me. Part two. Ancestors Are Calling Me. Right. All right. Let's continue where we left off. We know that the Anglo-Saxon Berber, all right, were here, okay, back in the times of Alfred the Great, because Wittemont was the government that was established by Alfred the Great, as well as the uncoded Magna Carta. All right, not the written coded, established in the Magna Carta in 1215. All right, as we said, was the precedence for the what it said for uh the rights of Englishmen. All right, for the rights of Englishmen, we got to understand how important this is for us being Englishmen. All right, and look at only from that perspective, nothing more. Okay, nothing more. Nothing more. Greetings. Uh, Cordell Harris from the House of Harris. All right, good to have you. This is part two of The Ancestors Are Calling Me. I just got finished doing part one. All right, greetings, Archbishop Belmont again. All right, we're picking up where we left off. Okay, so we know we got a government here as Anglo-Saxon Berbers called Wittemont, as well as the unwritten code of law called the Magna Carta. It's very important that y'all understand that. All right. All right. So let's go take a look at the Anglo-Spare. There's another view of the Anglo-Spare. Okay. As you can see, where the core Anglo-Spare is. All right. Which is the spirit of our influence. All right. Of our light. Okay. This is where we get our light from. We're here. We're not in Europe, Africa, or Asia. We are right here on this continent, okay? Which they deem the Anglo Sphere. We didn't call it that. They call it the Anglo Sphere. The Anglo Sphere is the sphere of influence with a core group of nations that today maintain close political, diplomatic, and military cooperation. While the nations include in different sources vary, the Anglosphere is usually not considered to include all countries where English is an official language, So it's not synonymous with the spirit of the Anglophone. Let's go back to rights of Englishmen. The right of Englishmen are the traditional rights of English subjects and later English-speaking subjects of the British Crown. So British Crown subjects learned to speak English versus the English subjects who already, that's their native language. Okay? It's very important for you to understand that. All right? What we just said. All right. In the 18th century, some of the colonists who objected to the British rule, which were British subjects speaking the English language, and in the 13 British North American colonies that will become the first United States, argued that the traditional rights as Englishmen were being violated. We know that's a lie because the Englishmen are Berbers based off the 1911 Encyclopedia Britannica, which was created in Edinburgh, Scotland, under the Scottish Enlightenment. Okay? You must understand how profound my lessons are. Okay, let's see the English overseas possession. The English overseas possession are known as the English colonial empire. It didn't say the British Empire, it said the English Empire. Okay, the English Empire, and don't let that little highlighter red fool you. Okay, don't let that fool you. It said the English colonial empire comprised a variety of overseas territories that were colonized, conquered, or otherwise acquired by the former Kingdom of England during the centuries before the Acts of Union, i.e., Great Britain, in 1707. Between the Kingdom of England and the Kingdom of Scotland created the Kingdom of Great Britain. You hear that? That's through the Treaty of Union of 1707. It's very important to understand that and not to amalgamate us all together. All right. So, through the Acts of the Union of 1707, between the Kingdom of England and the Kingdom of Scotland, created the Kingdom of Great Britain. Not meaning that we were all same, not that we were all family. We might have all been looked alike based off characteristics, but the nature of us was totally different because some were good, some were bad, some were evil, some were righteous. All right, we still got it going on today. All right. The many English possessions that then became the foundation of the British Empire. So now you got the British Empire contrast to the English Empire, okay? Which they only show you a little bit of the English territory because we're dealing with over here. We know at that time they were sitting under the auspices of the English throne, okay, but not the English monarch. Hold on, my battery. Overseas possession, right? All right. Now let's go down to the origin right here. In North America, Newfoundland, Virginia were the first centers of English colonization. During the 17th century, now you know they're lying because these are British monarchs ruling, so over the British colonization. See how they try to include us in a mess? In North America, specifically North America, Newfoundland and Virginia were the first centers of English colonization. You hear that? Newfoundland. All right, that goes back into the surrender of Amsterdam with Charles II under the restoration of the crown. During the 17th century, Maine, Plymouth, New Hampshire, Salem, Massachusetts Bay, New Scotland, Connecticut, New Haven, Rhode Island, and the provinces were settled. In 1664, New Netherlands, New Sweden were taken from the Dutch, becoming New York, New Jersey, and part of Delaware and Pennsylvania. Did you hear that? So you got to know your history. But before that story is being told, what existed? The Kingdom of England is generally dated from the rule of Ashton from 927, because we know that William Penn made his claim based off the turf and twig ceremony, which was created by Ashton, all right, a king of the Wessex, all right, and even though they were born with the Canute the Great, Harold Bluetooth, all right, who invaded England. Back then it was called Albion. During the rule of Hasnalinga from 1030 to 1014 and 1060 to 1042, England was part of the Persian Union that included the domains of Scandinavia. In 1066, William the Conqueror, Duke of Normandy, conquered England, right? And we know the Jews came in with William Conqueror in 1066, making the Duchess a crown land. You hear that? Making the Duchess of Normandy a crown land of the English throne. It didn't say the Scottish throne, but the English throne. Through the remainder of the Middle Ages, the King of England held extensive territory in France based on their history in the duchy. Under the Angevin Empire, England formed part of the collection of land in the British Isles and France held by the Plantagenet dynasty. The collapse of their dynasty led to the 100-Year Wars between England and France. So we know that was considered what we call the first 100-Year Wars, which was collection of wars that started between the Capitown Plantagenet dynasty. All right. Then you had the second 100-Year Wars, which started with the Glorious Revolution. All right. That gets into King James now. But we know that the Anglo spare and the English overseas possession was right here. Okay. It was right here on this territory that we call Earth now. It's called North America. Right. We must understand that. So now we understand that through the 100-Year Wars where the conflict came. We know the 100-Year War resulted after the first set of 100-Year Wars. Okay, the 100-Year War itself. We know the War of the Roses occurred after the first set of the 100-Year Wars, which are what we're talking about right now. Over here, okay, not over there. Over here, yeah, these are territories overseas that's governed by what we call the territorial rights. All right, right of territories on another landmass contrast to riparian rights. Riparian rights deal with land separated by a small body of water, contrast to littoral rights, where land separated from large bodies of water, such as oceans and seas. Okay, then this brings forth the term overseas possessions. Okay, overseas possessions. Right? You must understand that. What you're talking about. American Enlightenment. Gotta go back here first. Sources of the American Enlightenment. Sources. We're not talking about the American Enlightenment. We're going to the sources of the American Enlightenment. And one of the sources for the American Enlightenment was the Scottish Enlightenment. All right. And this American Enlightenment and the Scottish Enlightenment both used the common law of England. They both used the common law of England. They just took the king out of the picture. Okay. It just took the king out of the picture. Sources of the American Enlightenment are many and vary according to the time and place. As a result of an extensive book trade with Great Britain, all right, the colonies were, that's through the Scottish Enlightenment. The colonies were well acquainted with European literature through the Scottish Enlightenment almost contemporaneously. Early influences were English writers such as James Harrington, Eleanor Sidney, Viscount Bolingbroke, John Trenchard, Thomas Gordon, especially the two cases Cato letters, and Joseph Addison, whose tragedy Cato was extremely popular. A particularly important English legal writer, also known as William Blackstone, whose commentaries on the laws of England served as a major influence on the American founders and is a key source in the development of Anglo-American common law, which is still being used in the Supreme Court to this present day. Okay? Although Locke's two treaties of government has long been cited as a major influence on the American thinkers, historian David Lundberg and Henry F. May demonstrate that the Locke's essay concerning human understanding was far more widely read than were his political treaties. And we know that deals with the two treaties of government, going back to what we talked about, the Glorious Revolution under the English Bill of Rights of 1689 and the Claimant Right of 1689. We talked about that yesterday. I don't have time to go back through it. It's also American Enlightenment, although also dependent on the Scottish Enlightenment. It said it. The Scottish Enlightenment also influenced American thinkers. David Hume's essay in the history of England were widely read in the colonies. And Hume's political thought had a particular influence on the Madison and the drafting of the United States Constitution. Everybody hear that? On the United States Constitution. Francis Hutchison's idea of ethics, along with the notion of civility and politeness developed by the Earls of Shaftesbury and Addison and Richard Steele and their Spectator, were a major influence on the upper class American colonists who sought to emulate European manners and learning. Okay? There you have a brief history. Why do I go there? Come here for this. Christianity in medieval Scotland. Christianity in medieval Scotland. We'll talk about this for a little bit, then we're going to come to our half an hour break, and then we'll come back with part 3 of the ancestors are calling us, right? Christianity in medieval Scotland includes all the aspects of Christianity in the modern borders of Scotland in the Middle Ages. So that is the key. Christianity in medieval Scotland. Not England, we know when it came to England, it was due to the conversion under Augustine of Cattenburg, okay, and the 6th century, all right, which they're going to have it here, right here. They're going to talk about it right here, okay? Well, let's get there. It's going to scroll down, everyone. See the Church of England, Angelic Communion, Catholic Church of England and Wales, Church of England, Religion of Ireland, Religion of Scotland, Celtic Christianity, and Religion of Wales. Okay? Just scroll down. Early Middle Ages. All right? We don't want to deal with that. We don't want to deal with early Middle Ages. We're going to keep going down. Early monasticism. Okay, very important. Early monasticism as a result of what we call Christianity in Scotland. Okay? Early monasticism. Okay? This goes into the why we had the English spending the time before. Okay? This is why King Edward the Peaceful, our Jesus Christ, created what we call Westminster Abbey. Okay, this is why he created Westminster Abbey, and it was part of a continental or cosmopolitan or universal movement, a cosmopolitan movement. Okay, it's the early monasticism. While there were a series of reformers of monasticism in continental Europe and England, particularly those associated with the Cluny in France from the 10th century, Scotland remained largely unaffected. These until the late 11th century. Did you hear that? While there were a series of reforms of monasticism in continental Europe and England, particularly those associated with Cluny in France from the 10th century, Scotland remained largely unaffected. These until the late 11th century. There's your source. I don't want to think I'm picking on y'all. I'm not. Physically, Scotland monasteries differed significantly from those on the continent, were often an isolated collection of wooden huts surrounded by a wall. Right? There's your sources. Think y'all think I'm picking on y'all. The Irish architectural influence can be seen in surviving around towers of Brechin and Aberthinsty. Some early Scottish establishments had dynasties of abbots who were often secular clergy with families, most famously at Dunkeld and Brechin, but these also existed across Scotland north of Forth at Portsmouth, Portmahomack, and Portlack and Aberthin. Okay, let's move down a little further. All right, so we see that Scotland and Christianity that Scottish brought was unaffected by the ecclesiastical monastery movement. What we call the English monastery movement. It was unaffected. Okay. All right. I'm going to go right back there. So it said, while there were serious reforms in monasticism and continental Europe and England, particularly those associated with the Cluny in France from the 10th century, Scotland remained largely unaffected with these changes in the monasticism reform. Okay, what monasticism reform was going on at that particular time that associated the monasteries over in France? Okay, this is called the English Benedictine Reform. Once again, the English Benedictine Reform. The English Benedictine Reform or monistic reform of the English Church, not the Church of England, of the English Church, is late 10th century was a religious and intellectual movement in the later Anglo-Saxon period. That's why archbishops continue to say that this is an intellectual movement. You have to be intellectual to understand this movement. All right. You must have some type of intellect to understand our movement. In the mid 10th century, almost all monasteries were staffed by secular clergy, such as the Church of England, who were often married. The reformers sought to replace them with celibates and contemplate them monks following the rule of St. Benedict. The movement was inspired by the continental monistic reform. You hear that? A continental monistic reform. And the leading figures were Dunstan, Archbishop Canterbury, Ethelwald, Bishop of Winchester, and Oswald, Archbishop of York. All right. So, what was the continental monistic reform? Let's see. The Clunic Reform, also called the Benedictine Reform, were a series of changes with medieval monasticism and the Western Church, focused on restoring the traditional monastic life, encouraging art, and caring for the poor. The movement was begun with the Benedictine order at Cluny Abbey, okay, by Cluny Abbey. All right, it said that founded in 910 by William I, Duke of Aquitaine, the reforms were largely carried out by St. Odo and spread throughout France, Burgundy, Provence, Arvennes, Poitiers, and to England. England through the English Benedictine Reform and through much of Italy, northern Portugal, and Spain. So it was continental, all right? So why it had to be continental? Because of Christianity that was brought into England by Scotland, okay? Scotland. That's not the monasticism that we follow in lieu of the English Benedictine reform that didn't just take place in England, but it also took place in Cluny. All right? Also took place in Cluny. We hear Cluny, when we go back there, Cluny reform. So it's right there, y'all. This was a global cosmopolitan movement. Okay? A global cosmopolitan movement started by Atherton the Great over here, Ashton over here in what we call the Anglo sphere as a result of all the territory being what we call English overseas possession. Okay? English overseas possession. Because we see that the Kunich reforms was nothing more than an English spending time reform here in North America. Okay? Here in North America. As it says right here, in the 7th and 8th century England, most monasteries were Benedictine, but in the 9th century, learning in monasteries declined severely. Alfred the Great deplored the decline and started to reverse it. The court of Ashton, the first king of the whole of England, was a cosmopolitan and future reformer, such as Dunstan Ethelwood, who learned from the continental exponent of the Benedictine monasticism. The English movement became dominant under King Edgar, our Jesus Christ, one of the reincarnation of, who supported the expulsion of secular clergy from the monasteries and cathedral chapters and their replacement by monks. The reformers had close relations with the crown, furthering its interest and depended on it for support. Okay? Everybody see that? All right, we can move from there. That means let's go to the Church of England. I mean, the Church of Scotland, because the Church of Scotland was unaffected by this reform. All right? The Church of Scotland was unaffected by this reform. Why is this important? All right? The Church of Scotland. Let's see. For the history. The Church of Scotland is a current form traces its origin to the Scottish Reformation of 1560. At the point many of in the then Church of Scotland broke with Rome and the process of Protestant reform led, among others, by John Knox. John Knox worked for Edward the, Edward the Eighth, who was the son of Henry the Eighth. Okay, we must understand that as a result of the Scottish Reformation. Let's prove that. I don't want to stay on here this too long. John Knox. While in exile, Knox was licensed to work in the Church of England, not the English Church, but the Church of England, where he rose to rank to serve King Edward VI of England. You hear that? King Edward VI of England. All right. Who was King Edward VI of England? He was the son of Henry VIII. Let's just prove it before we go forward. Still talking about the Church of Scotland. Edward VI was King of England, Ireland, until his death. He was crowned on the 20th of February, 1547, at the age of 9. The only surviving son of Henry VIII by his third wife, Jane Seymour. Okay, so Edward VI was the son of Henry VIII, the house from the House of Tudors, whose father was Henry VII, the founder of the House of Tudors, who are in line with Henry IV. King James IV from the House of Stuart through the Treaty of Perpetual Union, what we call 1502. Which brought forth the Union of the Crown in 1603, as well as the Treaty of Union in 1707, which is how all this stuff got started. Okay, so we have traced the Church of Scotland, which was founded by John. What's his name? What was his name? John Knox. Okay, the Church of Scotland was founded by John Knox, who were licensed by Edward the Sixth, who was the son of Henry the Eighth, the son of Henry the Seventh, the founder of the House of Tudors, who took over the Plantagenet dynasty by way of what we call conquest. All right. So with that, that would end part 2 of the ancestors calling me, and I'll move on to what we call part 3 of the ancestors calling me. Thank you so much. I'll see you in a minute.